Welcome back everyone. The OnePlus 7 Pro came out a couple of years ago and right now it's coming about, I think 2 years old from its official release. And what I can tell you is the OnePlus 7 Pro is one of those devices that really was one of the craziest phones of its time, mostly because of a change of its price tag as well as the phone that you were getting. When you look at this phone, and even when you're looking at it now, it doesn't look like an old device, and that is one of the best things about this phone. If you want to pick it up, links will be down in the description. You can get them from there, help support the channel at the same time. Now the front of the OnePlus 7 Pro has a beautiful, almost perfect 6.67 inch 1440p Fluid AMOLED display, and it's a 90 Hz panel. This was one of the first, I think, major phones that came out with a higher refresh rate, but it was a cheaper phone than a lot of these other ones. It wasn't a $1,000 phone, and that was one of the best things about this device. It also had no camera, at least on the front, what it appeared to be, until you had that pop-up camera, which was crazy. You had a USB Type-C on the bottom, no headphone jack or anything like that. On the back, a glass back with somewhat of a triple camera setup, which looked really good. And in the hand, this phone felt really good. It looks really good. And this is one of the best things about this phone still is the way it looks. It looks still like a super flagship phone, which it kind of was at the time. Now it did have that triple camera setup on the back, and it was a 48 megapixel wide angle lens, 8 megapixel telephoto lens, then a 16 megapixel ultra wide sensor. And this was a pretty decent camera at that time. It definitely wasn't better than like a Galaxy S10 of that year or the iPhone 11 of that year or the 11 Pro, but it was still a pretty decent phone, and I really liked this camera. I think it had a lot of character. Now the front camera was a 16 megapixel lens, only 1080p on that back on the front camera, but the back camera could do 4K at 60, so that was a good thing, I think. But I think ultimately the overall camera review of that time was that it was a pretty good camera. I think there was a lot of positive reviews, a lot of positive feedback about that camera as well, and I still think it's pretty decent. Obviously it's not the best camera of 2019, but it's a very good camera for sure. Now, one of the best things turned bad things about the OnePlus series has now been the software. Oxygen OS has taken a really weird toll and a really weird turn, and I'm not too sure why OnePlus did this. It's just very strange. I think they're trying to match their Oppo counterpart from what I've heard, but it went from a really good stock-ish kind of Android version to now somewhat of a strange version on Android 11, and Android 12 doesn't look like it's going to be getting any better. So it's kind of one of the saddest things that's ever happened. I'm glad about the OnePlus 7 Pro because you can keep it on a stock version of Android. There's also been a ton of custom ROMs and stuff like that, so that's another pretty big advantage, but definitely not happy about this specific phone in terms of the software right now. Now ending it off with the performance, this device does have that Qualcomm Snapdragon 855 chipset, octa-core CPU, Adreno 640 GPU, and 6 gigs of RAM on the base model, 8 gigs of RAM on the mid-tier model, and 12 gigs of RAM on that top-tier model. Now this is one of the craziest things about this phone because it went all the way up to a 12 gig of RAM option. Me personally, I've only had the 6 gig of RAM option. I've had 2 or 3 of those, but it's still super crazy that this device came out in that specific, RAM management factor. That's a really big amount of RAM to have on a phone like this, especially in 2019, considering the fact that a lot of phones nowadays still don't even have 12 gigs of RAM. So that's another really massive thing about this phone. And in my opinion, when you have a device like this with 12 gigs of RAM, even from 2019, you're pretty much set for like the rest of your life. And I think that is a really cool thing about this phone. When you have a phone like this with 12 gigs of RAM, you're future-proofed, and with the OnePlus 7 Pro's performance, it's definitely one of the better things about this phone for sure. So to kind of sum up this video and to answer the question, should you still buy a OnePlus 7 Pro in mid-2021? Well, without a doubt, yes. I think this phone is still completely worth it in 2021. I think it's a killer phone in so many different ways, and even though it's kind of coming to the end of its life cycle within the next year or two, I would still say it's still a very good phone. This was one of the first phones I looked at in a very long time where I was like, wow, this is a crazy looking phone. Even though the Galaxy S10 shocked me in 2019, this one was even a bigger shocker just because of the way it looked, the pop-up camera and everything. So that's a massive thing about this phone. When you pick up a phone like this, the performance may not be like as good as phones nowadays, but the way it looks and visually, it just looks so crazy. It still looks better than a lot of phones that are coming out nowadays. The bad thing about this phone, maybe the software is now getting a little weird. The cameras aren't really the best compared to cameras nowadays, and only 1080p at the front, but I do think for the price that you're going to pay, it's an overall decent pickup, and I think it's actually a pretty good pickup in my opinion. So that essentially covers it. If you guys have any other questions or anything, let me know in the comment section below. Hit the like button, that would mean so much, but definitely hit that subscribe button. More importantly than everything else, I love every single one of you guys. Hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out till then.